Okay, everyone. So we gather again for our in-person and live stream Bible study. Welcome, everyone. And hello, Leslie. That will probably be Andy. So this morning we will be looking at the Golden Rule as we continue to look at the Sermon on the Plain in Luke's Gospel. And as I mentioned last week, that is Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount. And the question sometimes comes up, well, did Jesus preach it on the side of a mountain or did he preach it on a plain? And the answer is yes. Yes, good point. Yes, good. Yeah. And I would say that there are a number of possible explanations. Maybe Jesus was doing what every preacher does now and then, which is to preach from the barrel. Preachers are known to take old sermons from years ago, to dust them off and update them, and maybe Jesus did that. Maybe he preached it twice.
He did have different audiences.
And maybe he had different audiences. Yep. And actually, there is some truth in that, not from the standpoint of Jesus, but from the standpoint of Matthew and Luke. Each of them were writing their Gospels to a different audience. We know that Matthew was preaching to, or writing his Gospel for a Jewish audience. His goal was to prove to the Jews that Jesus was the long-awaited Messiah. That's why in Matthew's Gospel, you have more quotations from the Hebrew Scriptures than all the other Gospels combined. Obviously, if you're trying to convince the Jews that Jesus is the Messiah, you use their Scriptures. Luke was more interested in sending a message that this Messiah, Jesus, was for everyone, Jews and Gentiles. And the fact that Matthew was also targeting a Jewish audience is the reason why he has Jesus preaching on the side of a mountain. Because who else preached or received God's commandments on a mountain? Moses. So Matthew is trying to portray Jesus as the modern day Moses. So why don't we begin with a word of prayer? Lord God, we give you thanks as we gather this day to ponder the sacred words of long ago. We ask that you prepare our hearts and our minds to receive the wisdom that is waiting for us in Luke's Sermon on the Plain. We pray that you will also give us a clearness of purpose so that we may go forth and live the wisdom that we receive. All this we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All righty. So, without further ado, why don't we, and by the way, I'm going to say, I think we're at the point where the positivity rate is so low and we don't have any children who are unvaccinated that if you wish not to wear your mask, that's fine with me. Okay, so, alrighty, let me find. Okay, so this is the passage.
But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies, and do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you.
All righty. Questions, comments, and conundrums.
I was very intrigued by the very last line.
The very last line, okay.
Actually, the second sentence of
The
38.
good measure?
And yes, but with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And what I was intrigued by it because English has that wonderful ability to have a one word meaning two different things.
Mhm.
And measure can be the device or bucket or that which you are actually measuring something out.
Mhm.
And it can also be the amount that you have used that
Mhm.
device to portray. And the was interesting the analogy with grain and that because I was looking back in literature and one of the second tale in Chaucer is the Miller's Tale,
Mhm.
and the Millers apparently in the Middle Ages were suspect of either holding back or not giving full measure or being greedy, either taking a bigger proportion for themselves when they were buying someone's grain, or shorting.
Sure. Yeah, it's like the butcher who puts his finger on the scale when he measures the weight of the chicken or the steak that you're buying.
Right, because when we think of the analogies that Jesus was using, that so that people could relate to them,
Mhm.
that we have the analogy of course of the shepherd, we have the analogy of wine and meals, and now we have the analogy of grain, harvested grain being distributed or not distributed.
Yeah. So I found myself when I read that last verse, given it will be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. For whatever reason, I thought of a cup of flour. You know, when you get the cup up, you pour the flour in there, and if you
Right.
shake the measuring cup, it goes down a little bit, and you can get a little bit more. And
Exactly.
But don't do that if you're baking, it'll just mess up your recipe.
oh, okay. So if you're baking, you don't do that.
And that's
Okay.
why I'm gonna put it through a sifter.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Pump it up.
Right. Exactly. Some
Like,
recipes
it's too
call for.
much if you- But that's how it's measured, it's just like
Yep.
putting it in to
Right.
the top, and if you like tamp it down.
Right, it throws the proportions off. Yes, yes. So, yeah, I think that's a key to this whole passage, and maybe what we could do is start by looking at what Jesus says leading up to the good measure, and
Can I just make one?
yes,
I thought it was interesting that it's sort of like karma, that we don't think we have much, and Christianity has that much in common with it. I don't
Mhm.
even know if Hinduism.
Yeah,
or
yep,
karma,
yep.
so-
What goes around comes around.
Yeah, but it is like
Mhm.
that's kind of.
Yep. It seems what it's saying. Yeah, yeah. So I guess the question is then, why does Jesus say that? And I think to understand it, you need to connect the dots between what comes first and how this passage ends. And the verses leading up to the good measure are all about the golden rule, okay, which is in verse 33. No, I take that back. Verse 31, yes. Luke has the wording a little differently. When we quote the golden rule, we always say, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Luke says, and as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. Different wording, but the same golden rule. Yes, Sandy.
Okay, if you lend to others who don't pay you back,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep lending to them, that comes as a sacrifice for you in the hope that you convert them.
This is a good question. So you do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And if I understand your question is, you keep doing unto others when they don't continue to do unto you.
Right. And I would always pay people back. So if I'm lending to somebody who doesn't pay me back,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing unto others what I would want done to me, but they're not.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So what's our
And I think using a monetary example complicates it a little bit, although it may not invalidate the golden rule. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, the youth ministry went into Boston for Operation Clothesline, handed out all of the warm socks and brought others to a couple of shelters. And unfortunately, there weren't a lot of homeless people out and about because it was so cold. But I've done it long enough so that I know that if I walk down Boylston Street, I'll find some people there as I'm heading toward the Boston Public Library and then down to Back Bay Station. And the first two people we encountered, I always go over first and have the youth behind me just to gauge if this is a safe situation as a precaution. And the first two people said, you got any money? Okay. And we always talk to the kids before we go in and say, if somebody asks you for money, say, I don't have any money, but I have these warm socks. And we explain to the youth that giving someone money in that situation might not be a wise thing to do. Although Jesus says, everybody begs from you, you give to them. So what do you do?
Right.
Because if I give and I have a pretty good idea that that person is going to go and use the money to buy drugs or alcohol, am I really doing good to them? Mm-hmm.
Like buy a meal at McDonald's.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I would do that. I would. If somebody says to me, you get $5, so I can get something at McDonald's. If I had the ability and the time, I would say, you know what, I'll go. I actually had an experience like that many years ago, the day after Thanksgiving, and I was in my office, and this man drove up, and I could see he had a old SUV. And actually it was a van, and he came in and I got this tale of woe. And the tale of woe was that his daughter was at the University of Maine in Orono. Her car had broken down. He needed to go up and get her and bring her home. They were going to have a late Thanksgiving because her car broke down Thanksgiving Day, and he didn't have money to get there. And I told him, I said, well, I don't just give money out. I said, I would be glad to go to the gas station with you and have you fill up your vehicle, and then I'll pay for the gas. And the man said, well, that would be great. He said, but then I'm going to need gas to get back. And I said, well, I believe that they have gas cards that you can get that can only be used for gas. And he says, okay. And he said, but you know what? I have another car at home that get better gas mileage. And I said, okay. And I said, I'll meet you up there. What's now the 7-Eleven. I don't know what it was back then. And I said, I'll meet you up there in 15 minutes. Okay. You think he showed up?
No.
No.
You get that often here, Middleton Church Drive a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so we don't get it a lot here.
Market basket.
Yep, market basket. What the churches in North Reading do is they funnel their contributions through Christian Community Service, which runs the food pantry. And so the reason why we do that is to prevent someone from calling Union Congregational Church and giving a sob story, and I give them $25. And then they go to St. Teresa's and they give the same sob story and get $25. Now we say, we funnel everything through Christian Community Service, so it doesn't allow people to play these games. And, look, I understand what Jesus is saying, but I don't think Jesus is saying, be stupid about it and do not contribute in a way that allows a person to continue a drug habit or something like that. And sadly, they know all the right buttons to push. What one of the dead giveaways for me is? That it's not a legitimate request, is when the first thing they say to you is, Pastor, I'm a recently born again Christian.
Oh.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I remember another thing that they'll do is what I experienced many years ago on Easter Sunday. And it was the old sanctuary, so that tells you it was about probably 25 years ago. I was actually standing here in Putnam Hall, getting ready to go in the sanctuary, and a deacon came up to me and all, worried, and said, there's a person here and they need help. They've got a big problem, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. And it was 5 minutes before the start of the service. And so I went to the person and they started giving me the tale of woe. And I said, it sounds like a really serious situation. I said, I'm about to go in to begin an Easter service. I said, if you want to wait, I will be happy to meet you after the service and give this the proper time and consideration that it needs. And person said thank you, but they didn't wait. See, they'll come to you right before the start of the service because they know it increases the likelihood that you will just give them $20 just to get rid of them. Okay, but again, Jesus says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And I suppose I could say that in a situation like that, I've got some serious problems. Okay, I'm not taking responsibility for myself, or potentially that's the case. So in a situation like that, I would want people to do what's the best thing for me, which is to move me into a situation where I'm not taking advantage of other people. But again, Jesus says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Are there any ifs, ands, or buts there? Or any notation? See the note at the bottom for situations where you can disregard this verse.
Well, I suppose if I was on drugs or whatever, and I was trying to get money, nobody would, would get rock bottom and then get help. So in that regard, it's better to not just show them money or, say, I will buy you, a burger at McDonald's.
Yep.
And then you get, well, that's maybe not what I wanted or what I need.
Right.
Sustenance.
Yep.
Protein.
Yep. And I think what we have to do is we have to look at the overall picture. And what Jesus is...
You couldn't say every single
scenario
might ever happen.
And it's possible that Jesus is exaggerating a little bit to make his point. Okay, for example, where's the one? Oh, verse 29. To one who strikes you on the other cheek, offer the other also. And okay, I'll stop there. To one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. Okay. Well, one thing Jesus is saying there is, don't resort to violence.
Right.
Don't go to that level. I like to look at that verse and say, Jesus says, okay, offer the other cheek. But he doesn't say that you can't take a step back so you're out of swinging range.
Right.
Okay. I used to know a pastor who had a saying, Jesus calls us to follow him. Sometimes he even asks us to die for him, but he never asked anyone to commit suicide for him. Okay. I like that saying because what Jesus is saying, or what the saying is telling us, is that, Jesus doesn't want us to live our lives in a way that puts us in danger or, difficulty. What he's basically doing here is he's saying, be proactive. Okay. Love everyone. Okay. You don't get to pick and choose. Okay. And you don't get to say, I'll love you, but before I love you, you have to prove to me that your love for me is genuine and real and authentic. Okay. You have to be proactive in doing good to others. You have to treat others in advance in the way that you would like to be treated.
C.S. Lewis has some quote about like loving your neighbor and just like act like you do until and like it'll come, like fake it till you make it kind of thing. Like, just like if you don't know how to love your neighbor, just like act like you love them.
Okay.
And it'll come.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting because, some neighbors are not that lovable.
Right. But as you were talking, I thought of an old episode of All in the Family. And Archie is giving Edith a hard time because Edith lives the golden rule. And so he comes up with this hypothetical scenario, and I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but he said, suppose you're walking down the street and you see a neighbor pushing a baby carriage, and there's a new baby in there. And essentially he says, and it's the ugliest kid you ever saw. What do you say? He says, you're going to lie and say the baby's beautiful? And he thinks he's got her in this,
Can't lie.
you can't lie, but you can't tell the truth either. And so I'll never get it. So Edith, she goes, I would say, oh, now there's a baby. So, that's actually a good illustration. Don't, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. But it can be challenging. It can be frustrating. So,
like what Andy said, if people around you
uh-huh.
aren't living the same way,
Yes,
then it's very frustrating.
that's right. And we live in a society today where the attitude isn't the golden rule. It's a sort of a modern day version of the golden rule. I remember a story about a little girl who was in Sunday school and she was learning the golden rule, but she got it wrong. And she went home and she told her mother that in Sunday school she learned, do one unto others before they do one unto you. That's the reality. In fact, in the sermon Sunday, I may make reference to a very frustrating reality when I lived in the parsonage here on the corner. And this was a few years ago. Every night that summer, between 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning, someone would ride their motorcycle up Haverhill Street and gun it as they were doing it. And if I was asleep, it would wake me up. And it was every single night. I don't know whether the person had a job they were coming home from or what, but every single night between 12:30 and 1 o'clock. Rum, rum, rum. And I'll be honest, there was a part of me that wanted to sit out in my car one night and wait for that person to come by and do that, then follow him to wherever he lived up the street, then wait a couple of weeks and go and ring his doorbell at 3 in the morning and then just take off.
Yeah, but I sold that motorcycle. So.
You sold it, huh? Okay. So this is where we get to the reality that the golden rule sounds great on paper, but not everybody plays by that rule. And the reality is that as you do unto others, others won't necessarily do unto you. So in a sense, you could say that there's a burden that comes with the golden rule. Okay, it can be difficult. And I'm sure we can all think of situations where that's what we needed to do, but it wasn't going to be easy to do. So how can we turn the burden of the golden rule into a blessing?
I'm thinking of a neighbor that I used to have. She moved last year.
Mm-hmm.
Before. She was a taker.
Mm-hmm.
She kept it, if she saw some way that you could help her, she'd ask you.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you'd ask her, you'd never hear from her. So and I found, if I was in touch with her, she'd figure out something else she could take from me, service or whatever.
Okay.
So I just found, instead of saying anything, I just did less with her. I just stayed out of contact.
Yep.
And, that's how I dealt with that. I don't know if that prescribes.
Okay.
This.
So you had a situation where somebody was abusing your generosity,
Right.
taking advantage of it. And so one way to deal with that is you step back, you limit. It's sort of a variation of somebody takes a swing at you and you turn the other cheek, but you also step back.
Right.
Okay. So as you were talking, the other thought that went through my mind was saying to the person, I really like helping you. Maybe it's just my imagination, but when I've needed you to help me, it doesn't feel like you've been there.
I actually brought that up. There were several of us neighbors that we did a dinner thing. We're all single people.
Yeah,
so we all decided, okay, I'll cook dinner this time, you cook dinner, then you cook dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was her turn. She said, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm way too busy. Hello."
Okay.
So we stopped having the dinners. So.
Well, that's sad because everybody else enjoyed it.
Right.
And so you stopped doing it. So you stopped doing it, something that you enjoyed because of this person.
Yeah, we wanted to send her a message. So that's how we did it.
I'm not sure she would get the message,
but
no.
So since she's moved, then we've gotten together again.
So she moved away.
Right.
Yeah. Again, the golden rule can be hard, and there are situations you're going to encounter where it's going to feel like a burden. Okay, and so my question is simply this: is there a way that we can transform the burden of the golden rule into a blessing?
Well, it does, because it's the part of an end.
Yep.
So if you're doing all these good things, then good things are going to be given back to you.
Exactly.
Knowing you're building up capital, so to speak.
Well,
when it's needed, you'll be helped.
So you know what?
But I'm motivated to help people who I feel genuinely need it. I'm not motivated by the takers.
Right.
So,
and again, that's the burden of the golden rule. Right. We live in a world where there'll be some people where you do unto them and they'll say, oh, keep doing unto me. I like this.
Right.
Mhm. And again, I think that, Jesus would say, you step back from that person. But I think what you're pointing out, Leslie, is the key. Okay. Give and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And that's back to your comment, Leslie, about it seems like Jesus is professing a little bit of karma theology here. And while that may be a Hindu concept, I think it's also Christian, because Jesus also said, as you sow, so shall you reap.
Yes.
So now we all have an in, if we're talking, we meet somebody who's a Hindu, that we can kind of jump on a point.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And interesting enough, if you do research in other religions and ancient societies and philosophies, you will find a whole slew of golden rules in them. Okay. The one thing that Jesus does that's different is a lot of the other variations of the golden rule that you find in other religions and philosophies is stated negatively. In other words, don't do to someone else what you wouldn't want done to you. Jesus makes it proactive. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And I think that what Jesus is saying here is, look, he's no fool. He knew that there are people who will abuse generosity and things like that. But what he's saying is, look at the overall picture, okay? Sure, we can take an instance here and an instance there where someone did not do to us as we do to them. But when we do good with others, overall, that's what we'll get back, okay? So if you get a person who's really cranky, okay, that's what they're going to get back. The one that you mentioned that's taking, okay, she's going to, eventually people, wherever she is, are going to figure it out. And, they're going to cut her off.
And that's what happened. She lost a lot of.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So she is getting back what she gave.
Right.
She gave in consideration to other people, and other people basically said, "No, we're done with you."
Right.
So, as you sow, so shall you reap. The measure you give will be the measure that you get back. Now, here's the thing: is this I'll make a note here. Is this a promise, so to speak, along the lines of the law of gravity? In the sense that if I go up onto the roof here, and if I take a ball, a tennis ball or something, and I drop it, okay? The law of gravity says that every time I let go of that tennis ball, it is going to fall to the ground. And there is some formula that says how it will accelerate. Okay, I forget the term, but there's a law of acceleration with gravity. You can expect that as it falls this, and eventually it reaches a speed where it won't go any faster, okay? Now, if I go up onto the roof and I drop that tennis ball once each day for the next year, how many times will it not fall to the ground? Never. It'll always fall. It's a firm and fast rule. It's always going to happen every single time. That's not what Jesus is saying here, okay? He's going to say that in any instance, you're going to find where someone the measure you give will not be the measure you get back.
Right.
Okay. I just thought of an example. This, I don't think I'll use this in a sermon. I might. Oh, if you hear it Sunday, you say, "Oh, I knew that story." Some famous golfer, I forget the name. I'll have to look it up. He was competing in a tournament, and it was during a practice round before the tournament actually began, so things were much more casual. And after he did his practice round, he was walking through the parking lot to the clubhouse, and this woman came up to him and said, she had a sick baby and she needed money for medicine and everything. And I don't know, he gave her $50 or something like that. And the next day, the director of the tournament went to this man and he said, did you get approached by a woman telling you about a sick baby and she needed medicine? He said, yes. He says, the director turned and said, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but it's a scam. And I've loved his reaction, always loved his reaction. When he heard that, he said, you mean there was no sick baby? And the tournament director said, no. And the golfer said, that's the best news I've heard all week.
Oh,
wow.
Isn't that a great story?
It is.
That's sort of the golden rule, So I guess that's the other aspect of it is when you don't get back, the temptation might be to say the golden rule doesn't work, I'm done with it. So what you have to do is you have to look at the overall picture. As you give, will it be given back to you 100%?
You have no idea.
You have
No, but I think it's not only like God will be happy with you.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I think, a certain
Yes.
goodness to your life that comes like thinking, oh, I think God was quite happy I did that.
Yes.
But it's also with people, like they're just talking on the Today Show, wishing some weatherman in like Cincinnati, got cancer, and like he was so beloved there, he was taking billboards, and like he now is when he needs it, and people are just like, everybody is like behind him and stuff. So
He must have done a lot.
yeah, so you don't get it back, like you don't know when you'll get it back.
That's right.
And,
Exactly.
frankly, you're lucky if you don't ever need it back, because
That's
that means you got it pretty good, and so you wait till heaven.
Yeah.
to
Yeah. So exactly.
Good job.
Yep. Yep. So the payback for the golden rule, the blessing for the golden rule, it will come back to you in this life to varying degrees at different times, but there's also the eternal aspect of it, that when the time comes, you will hear the Lord say to you, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your master. So I guess that's another aspect of it.
It could be just like you're not getting, like, say, like you give a lot to charity or you help somebody, you're not, it doesn't mean you're gonna like win the lottery and
Exactly. You're not gonna win the lottery.
You could have like a good and happy life, and like, why are you deserving of that and not somebody else? Well, maybe
right.
God thought it was because you always donated your time to.
God knows infinitely better than us.
Or whatever that you do,
Yep.
I was going to say, you just never know. When my mother was sick for so many years and unwell, and I couldn't leave the house, I ended up in a seeking counseling, and I was in a group therapy program. And one of the people in the group program was a guy named Stephen, and Stephen had the personality of a porcupine.
Of a what? Porcupine?
Porcupine.
Yeah.
And you would try to say things at the end of this, and you ended up saying, you ended up going, ouch, by the time you got through the conversation. Stephen also seemed to like me in a way and would call me up, but sometimes his conversations practically ended up being almost abusive. And I realized that Stephen had serious problems, and I tried to be patient with him And sometimes I said, Stephen, we just can't talk anymore tonight, and I would just hang up because it was pointless. I mean, it was becoming circular. Well, the result was this, that is someone I knew and still know, and after a number, and I was in this group for about 4 years, and over the time, our relationship changed and Stephen got better.
Okay.
And so that it was, and I tried to be as patient with Steve as I could, and we ended up becoming good friends.
Okay.
And then when my mother's estate was being settled, and there was a huge gap that put me in a very difficult position, Stephen said, "You took care of your mother. I'm in a position to help you," and he did.
Okay.
In an extraordinary manner. And it was just, it was really.
So this was a person who was prickly at first.
Oh, yes, very, very different.
You made a big sacrifice.
Yeah, but because you basically practiced the golden rule, down the road, a number of years later, he returned that kindness to you.
In tenfold,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And you know, that's again, you know, we like things to be instantaneous. And that's not the way it works all the time with the golden rule. And sometimes it doesn't come back at all.
No.
Okay. But you got to look at the overall picture, you know, and generally what you give is what you get back. And you know what I was thinking about as we were all just talking? It's a Christmas classic that illustrates this very well. It's a Wonderful Life.
Right.
You know, if you remember,
He gave up the opportunity to have a great
yeah,
career.
George Bailey was always doing, you know, what others needed him to do. He gets to the point where he says, "I wish I'd never been born," and then at the end of the movie, you know, all these people who he touched their lives in various ways show up with money to replace the money that
His sister.
That was lost by
Lionel Barrymore.
Lionel, yes.
Lionel Barrymore.
Took over.
Yes, he played the character of Old Man Potter.
Yeah, right. And his assistant though was the assistant that lost the money. He had put it.
I thought you were talking about Potter's assistant. No, this is what was Uncle Billy? Uncle Billy. Yes, he puts it in the newspaper, and Potter ends up with the newspaper, and he sees the money. And you know, that's one of the things that irritates some people about this movie, is that in the movie there's never any consequence for Potter basically stealing this money.
The first time I saw the movie, that was the first question I asked at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And nothing ever happened to the guy. They didn't complete that.
But here's another way of looking at it. The measure you give will be the measure you get back. How loved was Potter? Everybody in town hated him, wanted nothing to do with him, you know? And the other question is, you know, when he left this world to go to his great reward, what do you think the likelihood is that he got a well done, good and faithful servant? Not very high, I would suspect.
And I thought when you go into heaven, it's not based on your deeds. It's just that.
Good point. It is not based on your deeds. That is works righteousness. And
Potter certainly didn't act like he believed in Jesus, but we don't really
this is
know.
true. He doesn't. There's nothing in the story that leads you to believe that he.
Judge not unless we judge.
Well, yeah, and that's what it says, right? So what is it? Yes. But there's another one. Verse 35. And you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and evil. So, you know, sometimes good things happen to bad people. That's the other side of the coin. You know, sometimes, you know, the question is always, why does God let bad things happen to good people? The other side of the coin is, why does God let good things happen to bad people? It's like, remember years and years ago when Whitey Bulger won the lottery?
Oh, yes.
Right.
Oh, right.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
It couldn't happen to a nicer guy, yeah. But, you know, what this passage is challenging us to do is to look at the big picture and to not give into the desire or the expectation of immediate payback, because it just doesn't work that way. As overall, the measure you give is the measure that you get back.
I think you could do a whole sermon on verse 37 in this day and age.
Verse 37? Yeah, judge not and you will not be judged, condemn not and you will not be condemned, forgive and you will be forgiven.
It's like the whole social media right there.
Oh my gosh, oh absolutely. You know, I tell you what, you know what, I might say this in the sermon. If you're looking for the golden rule in action, don't go looking for it on social media.
Although, I don't know if you saw, there was a picture going around, somebody put up a sign
Uh-huh.
saying, I love you, and
Yeah.
you might think it's strange, because I don't know you, but people hate for no reason, so I
Oh,
can
interesting.
love for no reason.
I can love for no reason. Yeah, I don't have to have a reason to love you.
Yeah.
Yep, very true, very true. There was one other thing I was going to say, and it slipped my mind. But, oh, I know what it was. It was on that verse you just cited, Leslie, and the end of it says, forgive and you will be forgiven. And I saw a quote recently that opened my eyes and my heart. And the quote went something like this: forgiveness isn't about the past, it's about the future. You know, we tend to look at forgiveness as focusing on what happened. We don't really think about, you know, forgiveness is really about the future, because you can't change the past,
No.
but forgiveness changes the future. So anyways, thank you, everyone.
And I guess there's no microwave recipe for the golden rule.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, there's no